our history, long forgotten, will be unearthed. Will their stories endure?
It was as any other day on that day of the last days. The sky was blue and colorful in the height of summer. From the high walls of the city, you could see far. All the way over to the high peaks of Mason Mountain, to the lake at its feet, glistening in the sunlight, for it was mid-afternoon at this point. Felix was basking in the day and his job, happy, though he hadn't left the city in weeks. With all the news of corruption lurking in the forests that almost surround the city, apart from the northern side where Felix was on watch, his usual spot under the eye of the mountain. Felix was human, like most of the inhabitants of the city. He stood at 6 feet and was young, only 20, which showed in his complexion and scraggly beard. His hair was long, dark, and almost at his shoulders. He had a good life, good looks, good health, and a good job as a watchman. Very little brought his mood down. He did, however, notice a change in the wind as he tickled his bowstring whilst watching. The day got cold and fast. Felix frowned as the weather went from glorious to depressing. The wind picked up, gray clouds blanketed the sky, and the temperature dropped drastically. He turned to the far end of the city. Something drew his attention to the stone-carved monument at the end of the city, behind the cathedral. He was told that it was a gift of some sort, magical, said to help them in dire times somehow. Felix didn't really take notice, as he was content. His life was good, and, sure, the evil in the lands did seem to either increase in activity or potency, but never either nor was it anything the city guard or the city's military couldn't handle. He shook away his thoughts and continued his watch, wrapping himself in his brown cloak to shelter him from the new strong winds. Felix looked up at the sky and could just about pick out where the sun was hiding in the dark gray clouds. It must have been close to the end of his watch on these tall stone walls. He looked around to see if his replacement could be seen, but nothing. Must still be time left as of yet, he said aloud to himself. Or they're bloody late again. He shrugged, turning to have another scan of the horizon. Something caught his eye. A rider? Coming from the trees. He looks like Barak, one of the soldiers of the city's military, and also Felix's older brother. Something was wrong. Felix frowned and his eyes widened. He was worried enough to see him alone when he left with hundreds to check on a local farm. Some trouble with local beasts or something. But Felix had good eyes and spotted the blood on Barak and his horse. Felix bolted to the gate, shouting, "Rider! Wounded rider at the northern gates!" Barak rode into the city, the gates closing behind him. He collapsed atop his horse, breathing heavily. A few men and women came to his aid. Felix helped them lower him off the horse, whilst others took the horse away or went to fetch the guard captain. Barak looked up through some blood to see his younger brother looking worried as hell. He almost spoke, but passed out. Barak awoke in a familiar bed. He scanned the room. It was his own, though it was not usually filled with people. A female cleric was tending to a wound on his left arm and cleaning all the dried blood off of him. Felix was there with a dumb smile of relief. Next to him was the stern-looking, gray-haired guard captain, Glenn Greenwald. Barak sat upright. "Steady," the cleric said to him. He recognized her as of the cardinal's assistants, Zora. "I'll live, it's mainly fatigue," Barak said sternly. "I must speak urgently." No one was ready to argue. Barak was a strong, determined man on a good day, and matched only with his own stubbornness. He's not someone you'd want to anger. "Agreed. I need to give a report to the council immediately." Glenn spoke with a sense of urgency. He was a man of business and action, and these events had him on edge. "Where's the city's army?" Glenn added. "Gone, or at least scattered at the least." Barak was interrupted by Zora handing him a wooden cup of water. He didn't argue. His voice was rough and dry from his events. He took a huge gulp before continuing. "We arrived at the farmstead as ordered, but the place was destroyed." "Bandits?" Glenn suggested. "Unlikely. The place wasn't burnt down, it was crushed, as if it was a snail's shell under your boot." Barak looked around the room, a mixture of fear and confusion on Zora and Felix's faces. Glenn still kept his stern expression as he asked, "What was it then?" We investigated and found nothing. No clues, no bodies, nothing looted. Nothing. Varric finished off the water before handing back the cup to continue. We followed what looked like human tracks away from the farm, but Varric trailed off. But what? Glenn exclaimed. You could see that Glenn wasn't angry. He just wanted to get started on this issue. They weren't human anymore. Fear gripped Varric's face as he said this, as so did Zora's and Felix's. They all knew what he meant. John, Glenn called out, and in came a watchman, who must have been guarding the door. Head to the councilman immediately. Tell them it was the undead that got our boys, and they will most likely be here next. I'll be readying the defenses. With that, the man saluted and ran off. What about the thing that destroyed the farm? Varric asked Glenn with concern. Nothing we can do. I need every man here, and that includes you, Felix. Report to the barracks when you are done here. Felix nodded as Glenn left the room. Zora had just finished cleaning Varric off when he got up to start getting his armor on. Shouldn't you be resting? Felix asked. It was just a cut to my arm, nothing major, and it was mainly fatigue that got me. Now, help me get into my chainmail. Felix looked to Zora to help him back up, but she smirked and shook her head as she began to gather her own supplies. Felix sighed and started to help his brother. Worried? Varric said, looking straight into Felix's eyes. Aren't you? A horde of undead heading this way, and we have no army. He continued to help his brother with his armor, but couldn't look him in the eye. Of course I am, but fear is useful too. How else do you think I managed to get back here alive? Was too busy shitting myself with fear to let myself be slow or give up. Varric gave Felix a large grin to help Felix's mood, but Felix seemed to pay no mind. He turned and picked up Varric's sword, handing it over to him. Varric took the sword and Felix turned to leave. I'll see you in the barracks, he said as he left. Varric looked over his sword, only now showing any sign of fear on his face. Zora picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder, picking up her mace with her free hand. Worried? She asked him with a smirk on her face. Varric chuckled, though his face returned to fear as he sheathed his sword away. Dad always told us, courage is just being the only one who knows you're afraid. I was never able to keep pace with everyone, but I always try my hardest with Felix. Your father seems like a wise man. You're doing a good job, Varric. Just keep going the way you are. Zora placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Burn bright, Zora said. Always, Varric replied. It's a simple farewell or prayer. Varric was grateful as she left. He mustered himself and shortly left the apartment.
Follow our links below for more content and subscribe.